Chapter 1 Valve.
My name is Mike Harrington. I was co-founder at Valve. I wasn't really used to big companies. When I started at Microsoft, it wasn't that big. It was like 1,500 people, like a big high school. 9 years later, it was significantly bigger. I'm thinking, oh, this place is too big. And that was still like 1996, so they had a long ways to go. I told my managers like a year before, like, I'm leaving in a year and I'm gonna start a game company. And the first person I talked to was...
About that, when you join a company that's young and fresh, you're not gonna have a lot of standards and you have an amazing job. You can do what you want. But every year, the manager come back to you with report cards and say, hey, this is what we need to prove on and this is what we need to do. They give you more and more tasks every year go by as the company continues to expand. That's horrible. So yeah, I don't blame him. He did the right thing.
Good friend of mine, Michael Abrash. But at that time, he was trying to do something within Microsoft, and by the time it made sense, John Carmack had convinced him to go work at id. So how could he say no to that? And then I was having lunch with Gabe, and I said, Gabe, I'm leaving. I'm just going to leave, and I'm going to start a game company. He goes, I want to leave.
Gabe is old. He has always been old.
I start a game company. Like, all right, and that was it.
On the surface, we should have failed. And
Still at the same.
Both Mike and I thought we would get about a year into it, realize we'd made horrible mistakes, and go back to our friends at Microsoft and ask for our jobs back. But we did think that we knew a fair bit about software development, that there were expertise that goes into it. I think we also had some pretty clear ideas of how to design a company, right? So when we were building Half-Life, we were also designing Valve at the same time.
We had no plan except for, by then, like I mentioned, Michael had gone to id. And he said, oh, you're starting a game company, you have to use our engine. So Gabe and I flew down to Mesquite to meet id. We spent a good deal of time with John Romero, and he told us, like, this is what you need to do to start a game company. You need to go out and hire some level designers and do that kind of thing. And we kind of understood the engineering part. And then, because we were Michael's friends, we walked away with the source code to Quake that day. We had no contract yet.
The thing about job nowadays, people have so many high standards. You gotta have a 4-year degree. You have to have 8 years of work experience. You gotta have certification, yada, yada, yada. Holy fucking shit. It is a nightmare. But back then, they'll take in anybody they want. Hell yeah. Hop on the train and we'll teach you. Just learn for yourself.
Idea what it could be. And they just gave us a CD, and we had kind of the crown jewels of id, and that, game on.
Dude, the 90s fashion
had no
so underrated.
Experience. We were either amateurs working in our homes at night for fun, or some people were from the software world, but they had never worked on a game.
I knew it.
I think we had 3 or 4 people in the entire company who had actually shipped a game when we started Half-Life. We have to figure out what is Valve's first game. So we have to come up with an IP. So everything is done from scratch.
Gabe came into the office and he said, I read this story. I read this Stephen King story called The Mist. Stephen King, it's got monsters, people in a grocery store, fog comes in, monsters in the fog, use your imagination. We didn't want to write.
The last Stephen King book I saw at Barnes & Noble was last week. I was like, oh, a new Stephen King book. I picked it up and it says Monster House, little girl got kidnapped, yada yada. And then at the bottom of the book, on the front page says, the ghost has COVID. I was like, nah, I'm putting it back. I'm done with COVID. COVID's over. I don't want to read about a horror story with COVID in it.
That as a game. That was
hey, Raven Kudo.
Just the
who's the old white dude? That's Gabe.
Well, it's interesting.
Gabe Newton.
Had 2 games.
The man, the legend.
Sparrow, and then Half-Life was originally called Quiver.
My job was then
I didn't know that.
build a team and figure out another game for us to build. That'll be the second game Valve ships. What features should it have? How is it going to be different from a normal first-person shooter?
Good
Every time
question.
the engine got a feature for Prospero, Half-Life stole it. And then Half-Life just started getting visually, more impressive and cooler. And eventually it just, because it was going to ship sooner, it
This actually reminds me of the video game called Spore.
just stole the resources from Prospero, and Prospero just faded away.
I had this character, had a floating orb, and It wanted to have some, effects on it. It's kind of magical energy, something. And so I worked with them on that and came up with the first version of the beam effects. And they were using it. They were happy with it. And then people on Half-Life are coming over and like, what is that? How did you do that? So very quickly that got into Half-Life. The disaster sequence has kind of beam effects all over it, and we ended up using it for the
Think about it. 1998. That's pretty damn impressive.
Vortigons.
Like there are a bunch of things that we were doing that we thought would help us tackle the problem of what video games were. And what video games were a rapidly changing field where at the time 90% of video games failed to turn a profit. And a few percentage of them were
Remember that one game we were talking about last week? Oh my god. The Last of Us copy version. The video game company shut down 4 days after the game got launched on Steam. Oh. What was it called? The day before? Oh man, I don't want to think about it.
very, very profitable.
It's
right?
so bad.
It was a field that really valued talent.
Like I said, Gabe and I brought some people, and then from there on out, we had to hire people. And Romero said you got to hire
You're hired.
designers.
You're hired.
We found some people who had industry experience.
Worked on Rise of the Triad first as a pixel artist, and then went with Duke Nukem, and then everything just went nuts. But I was sitting in my office one day, and my phone
Duke is a good game.
out of the blue, and I pick it up, and it's this recruiter. Eventually, he hooked me up with Gabe, and they flew me up here. It was a big surprise.
But then we started looking. The nice thing that we had is we had a whole bunch of people in the world who had been working on mods, and so we could start looking at those folks. And that's where we hired a lot of our designers.
Steve and Guthrie, Steve Bond, John Guthrie were my favorite hires by far. Other than Doug.
Uh-oh. Favoritism.
Gabe sent them an email and they're like, who is this scammer? Never heard of these guys.
Look at these dudes. They look so fucking rad. Like, come on, man. They're so cool. You don't get to see these cool dudes anymore. They're all pink.
Kids, like barely 20.
They're pink now.
And they show up and they're just the most creative, brilliant. Clever. Fucking clever. Steve had the magic ability to make stuff fun.
The fact that those guys have been hired to go work on some game for some company, I think that was the start for a lot of people that something cool was going to happen, because those guys were already doing stuff that was cool.
And then Mark showed up, and Mark actually knows how stories.
Hey, everybody. It's Mark. Say hi.
Beginning, middle, end, and all this stuff, and he had all sorts of great ideas, and he also would just bring good ideas out of everybody else as well.
Like the person who wrote more code on Half-Life was a chemistry major who decided to be an IP lawyer in Atlanta, right? And
Like I said, jobs nowadays require a 4-year degree, certification, 8 years of work experience. But back then, you're hired, you're going to have a house, a nice car, a 401k savings.
he ended up writing more code than anybody else. The creature designer for most of the AI for the creatures in the game was a manager at a Waffle House. It's not like there are a bunch of people that you could say, oh, this person has a PhD in video game design. It was that combination of both finding those people when it wasn't necessarily easy to find them at that stage in the video game industry, and then also convincing them that it was a better place to work than anybody else.
Quiver. This is 2 years before Half-Life. Here we go. Chapter 2, Reactivity.
One of the things that I definitely learned was how to hire engineers. And we needed some engineers.
For us anyway, we had licensed ID's engine. We're using the Quake engine. And one of the things me and some of the other engineers, probably Ken, were talking about was if it would be possible to use the save system to kind of like join our levels together in a really seamless way. So you get to the end of a level save stuff and then load some of it on the next level and have it just feel like, you know, the world's all connected.
Now, I don't know if this is the correct answer, but I do know that when Wolfenstein and Doom came out in the 80s, early 90s, and you're in this environment, looks like a 3D polygon, you're going from hallway to hallway shooting monster. Believe it or not, when the game was actually coded, it's actually 2D, but on top it has an optical illusion where it makes it look like it's 3D. Now, for Half-Life, I don't know if it's actually 2D or 3D. We'll find out.
And so we had, like, every once in a while, a hallway or the train would get to a point and you would have a little stop for the level to transition. And so he wrote that code leveraged on top of just the save load code to do the transitions. And I think in Half-Life 1 we got most of the transitions were, you know, a second or two.
You know, I remember when we went from 8-bit to 16-bit, like, hey, we don't have to have all our textures fit
Hey, it's Lady Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones.
in a certain, you know, 256 colors. That was a huge liberation.
The two tech investments we made for Half-Life was to get to 16-bit color and skeletal animation for all the monsters.
Kids nowadays will never understand when you go to a video game store or office or Staples, you pick up a box of Half-Life and you got all these cool pictures on the back with these words saying, hey, look at this, look at that. It's the greatest feeling in the world. Just holding onto it, standing beside your mom or dad, ready to purchase and walk out. Dude, holding a box, it's more fun than playing the game sometime, to me.
But at the time, it was completely revolutionary. Your Quake characters were, it's like a text file of vertex positions over time.
I wanted so much more animation, and I wanted the animators to have the freedom to put in 100, 200, 500 frame of animation, if not more. And then you can do all sorts of other things because you have a skeleton, so it's like, oh, I can hook on a gun to a character. I can start to make changes of characters and replay the same animation or reuse most of the same model, so we can swap out heads, we can swap out this, we can swap out whatever.
Like all the technology.
When you have a fresh IP, there's a golden opportunity that you can do. Just swap out heads, just mess around, see what you can turn into.
That went into the
Brilliant.
game to make it as fun as it is was not available one generation before. So licensing the Quake engine, which was, you know, very mature and had level designers who'd grown up just goofing around with it.
I wasn't heavily into scripting since back into Doom. Like my old Doom levels have a lot of
He's still not the same.
weird odd events in them. I think I asked Ken, is it possible that I could, you know, have access to the character's animation, like a trigger? Like what I mentioned, I could make the guys go into an animation, I could make them run, and then I would configure everything. It was all hack. This is total hacky stuff. And that is mostly what I built. It was like things like characters reacting and jumping out are made to look like, or I'd use a push brush to throw a head crab out to make it look like it launched at something.
Or if a loud sound happened,
They would respond, yeah.
Would
So-
cower.
Gabe's dictate was, as you walked forward, something needs to happen like every 3 to 5 seconds. The player stands still, the
Didn't have to be much.
universe can be quiet. But if they move forward, if they're active, the universe needs to play back something.
You're probably noticing me shaking my head left to right like I'm disappointed. I'm actually not. I'm just amazed in how they come up with all this stuff in 1998 before 1996. These are fresh codes, fresh ideas. This is like pure gold that you hold on to and it's still sizzling hot to this day.
Needs to do something, even if it is
Yeah.
a scripted sequence or
Or even
a
just
little
an interesting sign or
sign
something.
or
A Bohemian
sound
Rhapsody.
or some vignette or something. So I came up with this interaction method where you could do little AIs where the characters would talk and interact with you a little bit. And then we wanted to do spectacle, and that was scripted sequences where you could tell a character, you need to run here and then jump into this animation, and then have...
Now think about it. They mentioned there was a guy who used to work at a Waffle House, and there was a guy who had a degree in chemistry. They had no experience, and they came up with all the shit. That's how bloody brilliant that people can prove you can get a job without a fucking job requirement. Hello, we need people with passion.
A bunch of you all synchronize your animation because it's somebody flying through the air, they're smashing something, or they're doing something like that.
and then test it and figure out like, oh, this is real easy to break. That was the roughest thing about scripted sequences, where you'd have like a head crab jumping on a scientist or something, and it's like, yeah, it works totally fine 90% of the time, but some people just sprint right at the scientist, and sometimes we have to put them behind glass, and
sometimes
without a bucking job, without a bucking requirement. Half-Life, I bet my ass, if they hire people with experience but little to none of creativity, this game will probably flop. This game mentioned in the beginning, 90% of the video game company profit just went.
Getting the level designers making the player want to do the thing that gives them the most fun is a very subtle art.
The tentacle sequence is probably the one I remember the most.
You're playing it, right? That was the first time I think they melded together.
Because you had your trigger
so closely,
and we wanted it.
This is impressive.
So by the time you start to see it, you see the scientist flying through the air and hitting the wall. Then you could look in and you could see the scientist being carried away. The tentacle itself is separate; it's on its own, and you bring the two together, mesh them together, and boom.
It felt so seamless though, and that for me was like moments like that, and that might have been the first one, is when you start to see the scripted events and play start to blend a little bit more than
every motion with the notion goes into the code by code. This is impressive.
Just ambience.
Look at that. Little things make a big thing.
I remember Brett in particular had done some of the lab scenes where scientists would walk from one area to another and just look at a monitor. And it gave them a little bit of life. A ton of the work that went into that area was because we knew it was going to be the beginning of the game, and we really
little details
make it a
are important.
Fun place to be and explore.
So originally they were designed to sort of be behind glass. They were just designed to be spectacle.
yeah, a little vignette.
And then all of the level designers like, no, I'm gonna put that right in front of you. And I'm like, oh God.
And you know what's funny? When Fallout 76 came out, and Todd Howard says, 10 times the detail. 10 times the detail. Well, guess what? It was fucking bullshit. This is 10 times the detail, my friend.
How am I supposed to make this work? It's not supposed to do it.
It's getting cold.
From there, Freeman. I'm expecting an important message.
The run speed for the player was so insane.
Yeah.
It was like, what, 25 miles an hour or something?
It was sprinting.
You could get so far, so fast. And so you'd either have to make the scripted sequence like
he's intelligent.
So
He's a fucking brilliant.
You could barely see what's happening. Most people
Mad scientists
in the right place anyway. So you'd have to like get their attention with like a particle or a sound or lighting or something, and then you wanted them to see what was happening. But when we play,
sorry, look at this little glass on the floor. Look at that. I know I'm gonna turn off the subtitles. Sorry about that. Look at the little glass. Look at those glass.
play tested. And it's like a scientist was like being pulled into a van.
This is low-key so true.
Like people wouldn't just stop and like, oh. Sometimes they would be like, oh wow, look at that. They just run straight ahead and just start shooting.
It's hard when you think back to it to recognize that those kind of interactive moments were so new. Like people just hadn't seen them.
It was worth it because no other games were doing that. No other games had that interactivity.
It's true.
No other games had that spectacle playing.
The last game that succeeded so well was Wolfenstein and Doom and something else. Duke.
Out in front
this
of
is
you.
new. It's all about the physics and little details.
It just added that whole feel of Half-Life.
But the real question is the story good? We'll find out.
Interactivity, and the environment needed to let you do what you wanted and then react to it. So if you did something, if you shot your gun, there needed to be a bullet hole in the wall. If you did a thing, people needed, other characters needed to react. The world is acknowledging you exist. The world is acknowledging all of your actions. And that's this huge part of reinforcement.
And you'd have these conversations where you'd be sitting in a design review and somebody'd say, that's not real.
Gabe Newton is your Jesus Christ, Lord Savior of the 21st century. Dead is. Literal, serious. Very literal. He is your Jesus Christ.
Realistic, and you're like, okay, what does that have to, like, explain to me why that's interesting, because in the real world I have to write up lists of stuff I have to go to the grocery store to buy, and I have never thought to myself that realism is fun. I go play games to have fun, and so we had to come up with some notion of what fun was. We knew it was an ad hoc definition, and it was the degrees to which the game recognizes and responded to the player's choices and actions, right? You know, in behavioral science, you would say we're explicitly talking about what were reinforcers and what the reinforcement schedules were, right? At that point in time, that was a useful way of making design decisions. The point I would make is, if I go up to a wall and shoot it, to me, it feels like the wall is ignoring me. I'm getting a narcissistic injury when the world is ignoring me. So it is, like, to me, I was trying to convey to the user a sense of, yes, you were making choices, yes, you were progressing, which meant the game had to acknowledge that back to you. If you shoot at a wall, there have to be decals. If you kill a bunch of Marines, the Marines have to run away from you, right? You have to have this sense of the game acknowledging and responding to the choices and actions and progressions that you've made. Otherwise, it loses any sort of impact.
You cannot say that any better, what he just said. It's like you have a girlfriend, and you're in the computer, but you're ignoring your girlfriend. Of course it's going to piss off your girlfriend. Half-Life is your girlfriend. Your girlfriend gotta give you attention, and you gotta give your girlfriend attention, and you can have fun. Brilliant. Chapter 3. Monster Problems. Someone called Ghostbuster.
We were on the same page in terms of what the game should look like, which would be just sort of alien in a very naturalistic kind of way. Like these are creatures from another dimension, another planet that look like they evolved in a way. And Chuck had he came from Duke Nukem. He made a bunch of monsters that went in a sort of a different direction. And for a while, the game had a hard time coalescing around a single vision.
All the ones that looked like genitals were Ted's. And all the ones with shiny bits that looked like alien soldiers were Chuck's.
That was a thing when I first came in, Ted's style and mine.
And trying to figure that out.
Trying to find the...
Those character design remind me of the Alien Destroy All Human game, if you ever played that. Lots of anal probe in it.
The harmony between the two to make it work.
Yeah.
Ted he really liked the Wayne Barlow aesthetic, and I had a little bit
Halo
different,
vibe.
but it worked.
They could tell Halo was a little bit inspired by Half-Life.
The head crab, that's pretty much the symbol of it all. And I remember taking his head crab and putting it on a scientist and making the zombie. Right. Well, we pretty much we talked, and it's like, okay, you do that, and Ted did the soldiers, I did the scientists. I did a lot of the aliens, and with the Hornet gun, I did the Hornet gun for that one as well too.
Little details, guys.
Well, I did some animations for the bull squid or bull chicken. I have to call him that. But that's a Ted creature there. The hound.
That's a Pokemon leak.
I was Ted's as well.
Yeah, a lot of the fleshy. If it's got a lot of flesh on it, maybe too much.
Yeah, that's a Tedism.
You can always tell Ted's designs because they're much more aquarium than aquarium and/or
aquarium.
Like unspeakables.
That's a nice way to like your friend's stuff, but kind of low key. Don't wholeheartedly like it, but he likes it. Aquarium.
Oh, Big Mama! I forgot about Big Mama. Oh God!
It's a testicle, right?
See?
So disturbed.
I concepted a guy in sort of a NASA spacesuit, a scientist guy. He was actually modeled after a couple of programmers I know. Big, beefy, bearded Linux programmers, And so that's where the HEV suit.
That's actually pretty sick, not gonna lie.
There was a lot of desire for not having a space marine or a soldier be the guy. And then Chuck Jones went off and did a pretty different version of him that became known as Ivan the Space Biker.
Oh God. I remember telling myself, it's like anytime you make a screenshot, make sure it's good, because you don't know where this is going to appear again.
We didn't know that.
And Ivan is the prime example of that one. So, you know, you're looking.
These are the men of scholars and historians.
Well, go look at Quake. It's like, okay, I'm looking at that, and he's got this incredibly boxy head. And you're always hearing, don't put too many polys in it. And it's like, okay, so Ivan got the square head. And it was kind of an early, just a rough prototype of a Gordon Freeman baby.
What the hell is that?
And I remember we didn't know what Gordon looked like. So it's like I was looking for somebody, and I found Mike Harrington. It's like, Mike, what does Gordon look like? I don't know. Put yourself in there. It's like, oh, okay. And so I went in and put kind of my likeness on the early Gordon model in the game.
I didn't know that.
Stayed
Did
there.
you have a ponytail?
Well, I was ex-tattoo artist, so yeah, I definitely had. I don't have anything to work with now, but yeah, that point I had a ponytail on.
If you play the game, you know that it's Chuck. If you play multiplayer and you see the model, it's.
But yeah, if you look on the back of that, there's this little four
yeah.
triangles, and he's got a little ponytail back there. I did the G-Man, and again, that one was Gabe was talking about the Cigarette Man from X-Files. So we needed our own equivalent of that.
Because after a while, after playing with the game for a long time, people realized like, hey, we made this character, and just in this one office scene in the beginning, you know, where he's behind the window and he's talking to a scientist or something, and he's like, he looks really creepy. It was late in the day that we thought, oh, okay, well, he's going to be the big bad behind all of this. Like, scatter him around in places that you can't get to.
I remember as a kid playing this, and as a child, you really can't comprehend the story or the entire idea behind this game. But as a child, seeing that G-Man feels like I was actually having a nightmare feverish dream. Like, was he actually in the game? Am I hallucinating? It's kind of creepy. But that's the point.
He's there mysteriously.
He is.
There wasn't enough in the beginning of the game. It's like, we need another monster. Head crabs weren't enough. It got kind of repetitious. I think I grabbed Ted and said, I need them to do this and this. And so he whipped it out in not much time at all. I'm gonna get the timing just right. And I have no time to do this, so I'm just gonna bang it out. And then once it was working, everybody said, oh, let's go back and sprinkle them back in the maps. And that was
because then we introduced them a little earlier than we were planning.
Yeah, because they weren't real tough. They weren't supposed to be tough.
But they were ranged.
But they were ranged, and they were fun, and they had a big show, and like that was showing off a bunch of stuff.
I remember the assassin came in
Sound effect.
pretty late.
That was it. It was like, okay, I have a week and a half. It was already done, it was already all modeled, already all animated, and the requirement was it couldn't have any new animations and any new anything. So had to come up, I grabbed a bunch of Steve Bond's AI and banged that thing out. I built a level super crude, but it had all the right spacing and all the right heights and all the right, geometry.
Again, it's just a presentation where this creature gets to shine, this enemy gets to shine, and is your entire focus for that scene. And it's kind of a memorable experience because it just takes place in a different fashion than other encounters, and you get knocked out, and there's all kinds of the lights go out, and you get dragged through a corridor and things. So
that right there is an early cinematography, same how they do in Call of Duty. But we didn't really have that until maybe Call of Duty 3, if I'm correct, before Modern Warfare 4 came out. This little details makes a big difference.
Again, it's something you remember in the game. We just did a lot of playtesting and did a lot of level building and used all of the monsters and used everything that we had developed and started seeing which ones kind of stuck out a little oddly. You know, like we had the hound eyes that Ted had concepted, and Kelly had done great sounds for them, and so they seemed like a very...
It's that one dog that no one wants to adopt at the shelter.
oddly plausible sort of alien creature, and Chuck did what we called the Panther Eye, which was this big Black Panther looking creature that also just had a big red eye for his face.
It's a Pokemon.
And a big shark fin coming out the back. And design-wise, he seemed like this is a very useful creature. You know, it's like when you design things, you know, you like to have a gradient of difficulty, a gradient of escalation and threat. And so if we had these hound eyes, then oh yes, this like panther, bigger, scarier looking thing would be more of a threat. It was in the game for a long time and then sort of just worked its way out because folks couldn't find a way to incorporate a creature like that into the environment and make it seem reasonable.
The Stuka Bat was...
You can tell they want to put everything in the game so bad, but at the same time, it is in the 90s. And the technology is so fucking frustrating that they want everything in it to work, but they know they have to cut some slack because of technology limitation. It is so frustrating. I can't imagine that.
It was something that I did, just another creature from the air. We had the chub toad that we were going to use as a feeding animal to help, and they had a mechanic to where they were going to use this to distract monsters so you could possibly get by. And it pretty much reached fruition to where we created the object, but then again, time became the factor and it had to get cut.
A single person.
I grew up just outside DC, and so there's all these like big, really banal office buildings, and that's kind of the direction I went. So it started becoming a facility. And so I started making these kind of linoleum tiles and the drop ceiling, the concrete block wall, the black and white tile floor.
She was like...
She better get a pay raise. One person for the whole game. Woo!
The texture artist for for most of the game.
She gotta be banked
overwhelming
after this game came out.
Originally, I was hand painting all of the textures, and you can really see a shift in some of them where they go from hand painted to photo reference. The photo references are much, much better. So I was all over Seattle, Harbor Island.
I did not know that.
Getting rusty metal things. What can I get good pictures of that is vaguely industrial and interesting to look at?
I'm surprised they didn't get copyrighted. But again, I don't think copyright was really a thing back in the 90s when it comes to image references. So that's pretty smart at the time.
And then how can we use this? And so, sides of boxcars, and I don't know how many hallways in Half-Life are, the side of a train car kind of thing. The Kirkland Costco. A lot of time in the Kirkland Costco getting just packages of, I don't know why I needed snack.
Look at those prices at Costco. Now it's like $7 to $8 for a pineapple, but back then it was $2
or something.
November 1997, 2 months after I was born. Uh-oh.
The first year was all about opportunity, and it wasn't quite as focused. We were finding our footing.
We were getting into the 3 months before supposedly shipping in '97, and it's like, this isn't gelling. This is really not good. This is like, quick knockoff, cash grab, stupid, and let's not do that. There was a lot of disconnect between what all of the different groups were doing, what engineering was doing and what level design was doing and what animation was doing. We had a bunch of monsters that had no plans to get in the game because nobody else was assigned to work on them, and we had a bunch of levels that like, what's supposed to go in here? Oh, I don't know, everybody's gonna do a bunch of stuff, and like, no, that doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So here we were, all these people doing all these cool things, and just everything's just this random collection of, oh, here's a cool moment and a cool this, and and then it's gone, and oh, now on to the next thing. Because the way we were building the game was, Every level designer was kind of his own silo, his own universe. And I think that just grew out of our, kind of mod developer roots, but it wasn't cohesive, and it certainly didn't have a strategy for like maximizing any of that stuff.
You must have been in the meeting when we reviewed all the levels. It was like the first time everybody piled into a room,
right?
And Gabe had his crazy Hellraiser chair with the beautiful Mac monitor.
He's like, oh yeah, about that.
And we played, for 2 days, he played everyone's levels. But I remember one moment, he turned around, he was like this with his hair, he's going, we're gonna fail, we're gonna fail, we're gonna fail, we're gonna fail, we're gonna fail. And I was just like, it blew me away. I was like, oh shit, this isn't good.
We were doing our best trying to make this game and the story. And we had a schedule from Sierra, and it was a tight schedule. And we told them, like, we're not gonna ship this. And we realized that you're not gonna pay us to continue developing this, but we're going to do it anyway.
Late is just for a little while, suck is forever, right? We could try to force this thing out the door, but that's not the company we want to be. That's not the people we want to be.
That is Activision Blizzard. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. What Gabe Newton said, don't do it, and they fucking did. $70 for a cash grab, recycle DLC game.
The relationship we want to have with our customers.
He warned you
kind of
25 years ago.
Down and sort of tried to take an inventory of all the cool stuff we had built, and why weren't we just, building more on top of that? And those discussions kind of led to us building this kind of design cabal process to try to give some cohesion to the game and kind of changing the way we were approaching it.
And so a cabal was a small group of people, multidisciplinary group. There's like an artists, level designers, engineers, and everything in that. A small team that would write up a spec for a level. There was the arc that Mark had written, so we knew how that fit into the story.
And we got a small group of people together, and we started with the beginning, and we went through literally what map do we need to build to tell us the story we're going to have to tell, and then what does that connect to, and what's the next piece and the next piece.
The strongest and most...
I have never seen anybody sit down and go detail by detail by details with notes and notation on the side of the piece of paper. That tells you how much they care about the game. Love, passion, and no college degrees.
Influential.
No certification, no requirement.
And they were
Pure
really
creativity.
the visual meeting notes, right?
We came up with a formula for how that worked. We had a certain percentage of the time where you were fighting.
It's all about
a certain
love,
percentage of the
man.
time where you're exploring, a certain percentage of the time where you're solving puzzles. And so we could apply that uniformly through the game, and that worked pretty well.
Testing. Everything seems to
Chapter
be in order.
4,
Good morning,
Resonance.
and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel.
The whole opening of the game was specifically a reaction to how all the other first-person shooters were, whether they had cutscenes or not. Like sometimes, like they would just open without a cutscene, but you're standing in a room with.
I remember there were a lot of games on GameCube. For example, Army Man Sarge War. When the game began, I was just in the middle of the road with these two soldiers, and we were just walking and shooting. But with this, in 1998, they had an open cinematography, low-key scene for you before you actually begin the game. You gotta have logos, logic, pathos, emotion, and ethos, reputation for this game.
The gun,
Those are 3 Greek
the
words.
thing attacking you. So we could look at examples of all that, and I think there was expectation that that's what Half-Life had to do because every other game was doing it.
I can tell you the number of people who started up the game, were staring at it, and then accidentally bumped their mouse and realized this is live.
Yeah.
And as simple as that sounds, it was mind-blowing for so many people because there was too much going on. This isn't real time, this is a recording,
That was sort of the way we, stumbled through a lot of the new narrative tricks. It was like, well, what can we do that you could do this in a movie
What can we
or a
do?
story, but nobody's doing this in first-person shooters.
You're this anonymous scientist, and you're writing on this train into work and rolled the credits at the beginning. It was kind of like a cinematic experience almost. Like, I don't think games had really gone down that way.
Cinematic.
It's so funny to look at it now because it's so primitive, but at the time it felt like you were really in this Black Mesa world.
Pre-disaster survived from the first year, so a lot of that geometry was from that first version of the game, but in a very minimal way, right? Just the basic style of some of the hallways, the curved corners in the hallways, things like that. They more became sort of like Lego pieces that John could use and stitch together and extrude. And I know Brett did a lot of the raw geometry from pre-disaster, and then John did most of the work to ship it, and then the post and the train ride was all John, I think.
The Sector C, so those are heavily influenced by NASA control rooms, with my favorite green Hammerite, really influenced a lot of like we started with the kind of the consoles. I'm trying to remember, and then there was just lots of hallways and people were getting lost, and I did the color stripes to help people follow them places.
One of the things that was actually super exciting
is she's responsible for all the texture in this game. She must have a hell lot of folders to be organized, like folder 1 for this level, A, folder 2, level 1, B. It's so many folders. Mark my word, I bet she has lots of folders.
was how cool
It's all her doing
a lot
this.
of it really was. You know, the lunchroom with the microwave, you press the button and it would go splat.
My God, what are you doing?
Yeah, all this work so you can start a microwave and blow up some soup, which was a reference to real life, because that happened regularly. Like, we regularly accidentally blew up.
Ladle mostly, wasn't it?
There were a few people who were just, challenged with kitchen appliances. And, at one point we had a company fire. we had a lot of things going on in that kitchen.
All of that stuff had a real kind of eloquence that in the late 90s, in a world where everything was so over the top, but we still got to go on flights of fancy.
This game in the 90s feels like it was in 2010. And games today in 2020 feels like they're... It's so sad. It's so fucking sad. Games will never be the same again. It's all about money.
Pivotal
Money,
moment
money,
for
money.
me, was when we came in this one morning and we saw the test chamber sequence that Kelly and John Guthrie and Wedge was in that office, and Dario Driller. They were all in this corner dark office where so much cool stuff happened. But so Kelly and John stayed up all night and did the test chamber sequence, and it's pretty much like the one we shipped.
I mean, that was a lot of what went on in that room that we called the submarine. It was just improvisation, just what can we do to solve this problem? How do we connect what's happening before to what's happening after? This needs to be somehow important, but we just don't know what to do. John and I talked about it. I went home that night and I sort of sketched out, maybe we could do something cinematic. We'll take the camera away, we'll turn the lights off, we'll do sounds, we'll just throw everything we can at it. We built that basically that day. It was just a sort of a one-day throw it together. That's how fast we were moving.
They had audio, right? We had
Yeah,
the script.
yeah, it's like the heartbeat and the breathing, all that stuff was in there. And I played through it and it was like, damn, I have not seen this in any medium, in anything before, experienced something like this, where this immersive experience of this actually happening like this. And at that point, it's like, okay.
I'm going to repeat that word, immersive.
Okay, I see what it is we're doing. And it's this kind of immersive, unbroken experience that happens to you, the player. And then that was this key principle about how, we never take you out of that role.
Personally, the difference between before the disaster sequence and after the disaster sequence, I felt we really I had an understanding that this product was going to be special, or it was going to be possible, it was going to be tied together. Whereas before that, there was a lot of really good stuff and a lot of little things all disconnected. But you guys managed to tie two very different parts of the game together really well, and I thought, okay, now I feel like we're on a track for finishing this product. To me, it shifted my brain to have a lot of confidence that this product's coming together rather than just generating a lot of content that exists independently of other content.
One of the ways we were funding our development was we sold a preview copy of Half-Life to a video card company, I forget which one. And so they had in their contract that we had to deliver it to them by a certain date. And we got like the first 3 levels done for them. It was really a good milestone for us, just, from working as a company, because hey, there was a deliverable. We got it done. And we shipped it off to them. And then I swear the next day it leaked. And I was just livid at first, which was stupid. But I was just like, I can't believe you guys let this get out. Like, this wasn't us, And then it turned into something amazing where people started playing it. And it was all over, and we started, seeing it, online, what people were thinking about it. And I forget which magazine who said, usually we don't review, beta software, but they reviewed it and said, this is awesome. And that gave us a tremendous amount of confidence. It was an outside validation of what we were trying to do, that it was the right thing.
I have no words. Chapter 5, Shot and Loose.
I think just with first-person shooters already, they were kind of like the vowels of weapons you put into first-person. You got to have a shotgun, and there's obviously a pistol. You need your weapon that's going.
For some reason, shotguns are very critical in old games.
You to get another weapon.
That was a lesson in how to make all of your weapons as orthogonal as possible, so each one did something completely different. All of the crazy weapons, those are my fault. So I did like the rocket launcher and the Gauss gun and the Snarks.
I didn't know you can do that.
Oh, I like Snarks.
I think I did that
laugh.
before.
It's just always funny to watch people run away from the Snarks.
The squeak grenade. It's called the Snark, but I wanted something, a little creature that you could bring up and hold, and you could throw it out, and it would just start running. Because people were camping, and everybody hated campers at that point. So you wanted the.
I do not mean like that.
But it was kind of, you could literally find a little hidey hole and just sit out there and just throw out 30 of them, and they're all over the map. I had a cat. And you'd sit there and you do your finger blue. Yeah, you do your finger towards him, and he'd get mad at you and he'd swat. So that was the inspiration for that particular animation. And then the other, that big alien creature with the, we needed some kind of alien weapon. Drew that one, built that one, animated that one, but that was also another one that whenever you could get in a corner and just shoot them in the air because the hornets would track. I think that was the biggest thrill, is brainstorming these with your
that
crew,
is fun.
making them, building them, putting them in the game, and then playing with them, and then they're fun.
So there's sort of a trope of having a melee weapon. I think it was Steve Bond and Ken Birdwell and I were saying we wanted a device where the world was reacting to you. It really goes back to that theory of fun. But we were just running around like idiots, smacking the wall. It's an odd thing to know in retrospect, but at the time it felt profound.
I love every time when Gabe talks, he never ceases to disappoint me. Really
satisfying to be able to smack walls. And that was just an example of how that fairly abstract notion of what fun was ended up translating into a set of decisions that were really visceral. When you're going around whacking a wall, a crowbar is an obvious thing to whack the wall with.
Another single person? What? That one year when the game came out, just imagine his bonus check.
If the sound could let you know what's going
to
happen,
that's
really makes it powerful. So we're always on the lookout for that in level design and monster design, communicating, because the AI is often hidden from the player. So we use the sound to broadcast the internal state of the AI. soldiers.
Little
tell you,
details.
I'm injured. I'm going to throw a grenade. I'm taking cover. They are broadcasting as constantly as they can what's about to happen. So it was really important to try to keep those states distinct so that as you play the game, you're actually, whether you're aware of it or not, you're starting to be able to tell what's about to happen.
We knew he was a musician too, so
especially when the bomb goes off.
He also
or a
decided
tripwire.
he was going to write the sound engine, and then he wrote the soundtrack. And he'd never written a soundtrack before, and he wrote the whole, soundtrack for the game, and it won an award, and it was crazy.
There just weren't that many of us. I had a little bit of a background playing music. I understood the sound engine really well, so it was really easy for me to just hook sounds.
Bam, they got old.
And I understood enough about the level design side that
I'm old too.
Kind of connect those things a little
But
bit.
damn.
The sounds could come from
They're
anywhere.
old.
And then I just heavily modified them. Usually those are animal sounds. Reversing, changing the pitch, chopping them up and rearranging them. Head crabs were rats. The little squeaky, yeah, that's a rat slowed way, way down and then reversed.
Yeah, the DSP stuff was another cool thing that Kelly built. When you got an event, it sounded like you were an event, and that wasn't really happening, I guess.
One of the things I hate when it comes to 90s game is the fucking vent. It's like one of my biggest phobia. When you're in the tight, condensed vents and these early polygon graphic design, it feels like you're about to close in onto yourself and burst into this tiny molecule that fades away into the air. That's just how claustrophobic I feel. Especially when you have skyrabs and the narrow vent. I just pause the game, I get up, get some cereal, and I come back and press play.
At least in Quake and other games I was playing back then.
We had these huge silos, these cavernous spaces. The day they had their own echoey DSP, it made an enormous difference, right? You believed the space.
Kelly tells me, oh God, Chuck Jones asked him if the characters could speak and have their mouths move. And Kelly said, that's super easy. I could just look at the audio and see if they're talking and do that. But like getting their mouth to move is stupid, he says to me. And I look, Chuck Jones told me the same thing. I told him making the mouths move was super trivially easy, but knowing when they're talking and knowing how to follow the envelope of the speech would be impossible. And Kelly and I just both looked at each other and like, oh. And so I went back to my office and he went back to his office. And I think within an hour, the characters were talking and their mouths were moving. And it was only because we sat there at lunch bitching about an animator who was 100% right.
Why are you leaving me here?
Scientist conversation.
I love this game. I want my refund. Wait, did I say refund? I mean, this is the greatest game ever. It is.
Kelly and I made that.
No
When
sarcasm.
they're next to each other, one scientist will occasionally play a question, and the other one will give him an answer. And it's not a script, It just it might not always make sense.
I am rather looking forward to this analysis, aren't you? I don't think so.
But
That
it
is
had a bunch
freaky.
of personality. It was really cool. And it worked
But
on
cool.
getting those guys to look at you and turn their heads.
When we first added the ability for scientists to respond to the player and other things in the environment, I would call them response rules. The first time that went in, they came flying down the elevator, and one of them looks at you and goes, "Oh, hello, Gordon," and then they explode into a pile of jibs at the bottom.
Gotta have a little comedy in it. Chapter 6, Building Black Mesa. In isolation.
I hadn't really started working on the biggest part of the game, which I ended up shipping, which was Surface Tension. Prior to then, a lot of the work that I had done was the Alien Research Labs, which turned into questionable ethics, and all of that was ditched. There were some concepts made it through. Everything was rebuilt from zero. But you know what did make it through was Power Up. Yeah, basically that geometry survived completely intact. It was so closely designed for that creature that because the creature survived, the levels survived along with it. Yeah, there's this sort of central circular thing where you have to rotate the train, and you have to kill the Gargantua first because he was always defending the way out. And then you have to go to like another area which looks very much like it was designed for Quake, because pretty much it was. There was a flooded pump room, and you have to drain the generator, and then you can switch the power on, and then you can take the train out. Yeah, I remember him being totally central to this whole thing. And then, well, how do we block the player? Which is, I mean, that's pretty much like design point number one for all level design. Okay, well, how do we prevent the player from just walking straight out through the exit? And you design backwards from there.
In the first year, we built a lot of world space, a lot of track as we call it, and the programmers would try to fit the AI into the existing maps. What we did the second year was we built the AI in very constrained environments that showcase the AI. Let's make the ideal space for the AI and then give that to the level designers to incorporate those elements into their map so that it works.
The AI in games today are either can be really good or they can be really bad. For example, I might be wrong, but the game Dungeons and Dragons starts with a dark something. The point being, the AI in some games can be very trivial. There can be some error in some coding. There can be complexation. It is so complicated when it comes to AI, but for Half-Life, Black Mesa, they're very meticulous. You gotta be very careful, especially when you're using technology that's freshly new. You gotta be very, very careful. Like, if you buy this game at the store and you run the game and the game doesn't work, of course they can't update your game with the update patch. That doesn't exist until, 2010 or later? I think AI is the hardest part to do in this game. You mingle with it, you activate sound trap, you gotta have the AI to think what they should do and not what to do. AI is something that's a real pain in the ass. And it is to this day. AI is your worst enemy as always.
And that Gargantua was an example of that. And the grunts especially.
Yeah, we had the AI that Steve had been working on, and he had designed all these interesting encounters with them just in his test map, and so he had them up high and down low, and so basically we just sort of re-leveraged that and say, okay, let's start where the player comes in low, and there's a Marine on the same level, and then the next one they're up high, and then they come running down, because it was really neat to see them retreat. They'd try to run back up the stairs and try to flank you from another side.
Steve Bond, like I mentioned earlier, was this really young guy who had been making mods in QuakeC, really the designer for so much of the AI. I mean, all the stuff that's good about the soldiers, the grunts you fight in Half-Life.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a language we could sort of use to say, this is a place they can climb, this is a place they can jump to, this is a good place to hide. These are good places to go in general, or interesting places. So, the AI had a little bit of help. We were trying to build something that utilized, the train technology that Jay was working on. And we thought, well, let's give the player something that they can control, but in a limited way. We couldn't do vehicles like you see in Half-Life 2. So we did this, the most constrained vehicle we could think of.
As I mentioned earlier, the polygon graphic design. If you have an object on top of another object, which is a surface beneath you, if it falls through, the game's broken. But look at this. They have the floor, they have the water, they have the train, and then there's you. That's 4 layers of objects into the level design. Very complicated. Bet them.
Which was the train. Players didn't always bring the train with them. And so you had a bunch of these poor people walking down these tunnels.
Oh, is that why you electrified the
And
rail?
and the rails were, that was part of the
Kept
feedback.
dying from that.
Part of the feedback was, well, you can just bypass all that, so we made the rails electric. It's like, well, maybe that'll teach them to bring the train with them. But the basic idea is, let's explore that, and then also reveal some of the hidden deep parts of the base, the abandoned areas where you might get a lot more of the Zen creatures. We had designed some of the ones that didn't make it into the game to appear there, bats that would dive bomb you, and while you're on the train, Stuka bats, and then we also tried hard to not make it feel like it was the super linear thing, so we tried to give little branches, and so there were some challenges there.
Very, very humble men making this game. Very humble. Little challenges.
There was a really good sketch that Kelly Bailey made, which basically charted surface tension, and it was pretty extensive. Like, it went through the cliffside, and it went through areas where tanks were, and like a lot of soldier holdouts. Yeah, it even went through the desert with the cactuses and the helicopters, and then across a dam. It was pretty extensive. When I saw that sketch, I was so motivated to just start building all of that stuff.
So I ran ahead with a lot of level design, a lot of geometry, and it seems like a lot of it stuck in some way or another, which is really amazing. I did the dam, which was funny. I just did that in a day. Like, it was like about 4 or 5 hours. I did a Hoover Dam thing because I like the Hoover Dam.
I saw a concept of the cliffside. I think Harry Teasley built that render of the skybox. Yes. And I just thought, holy crap, this is perfect for Vertigo. Like, whatever we do here, we have to play on Vertigo and like narrow little edges and places you would like to normally dodge a grenade, but you can't.
The background is mind-blowing.
And that's the moment. That's really the big part of that level, is that reveal, and the play is kind of supports it afterward. Yeah. The helicopter comes in, you're fighting the helicopter, which is awesome.
First of all, I had a bunch of textures, and then every time I made new ones, whoever was working on the new levels would be like, oh, fresh textures, I'm going to use those. Somebody making another level would start using them, and I was like, no, this is chaos. We need to restrict this. So I started naming the texture sets.
Just imagine 10 things blowing up at the same time. The game will crash. The graphic card will not handle it. So yeah, of course you gotta have limitation and restriction. Of course.
By the level that they were made for, I was trying to enforce some sort of like visual cohesion, and so that really ended up working.
There was one level I did, it was the introduction of the sort of the bounce pads, the alien bounce pads in the real world. Because, story-wise, like, okay, you're getting closer to hitting the alien world. So I was, well, let's get a little bit of alien world infection into the real world. So I had done it just as a visual thing. John Guthrie made it 10 times better. And that's actually where he found the photo of my daughter, because I didn't put my daughter in Gordon's locker. I hid her in like this destroyed office someplace, as a little Easter egg for myself. And John went and put my daughter's photo in Gordon's locker, which I think was a good decision.
Okay. Not gonna lie. That's a really cool Easter egg. Chapter 7. The stories we tell.
Questions about stuff that I spent 5 minutes on 25 years ago from people who've now thought about this for 25 years, and they're thinking that there's 25 years worth of development went into this. I'm like, on some level, when you start talking about lore, I'm like, well, there's Black Mesa. That was just a matter, we needed a name for something that was evocative.
In that entrance, when you get off the train and there's that lobby where there's a big map on it, and when we were making that map, that was fairly early on, I put a dot in New Mexico. And then that turned into, I think Mark saw that and he was like, oh, where is that? This is where we are. And then he named it Black Mesa. I didn't know that.
That is a favorite thing of mine, actually. If you come up with a name for something and it evokes something, then you don't have to write the whole story. It's because it's a conspiracy plot. Everybody knows more about it than you do, so you don't have to answer those questions. Just keep raising questions and make the mystery kind of thing.
Like dialogue came in later. Also, a lot of the scripted sequences came in later, and those helped to kind of sharpen the storytelling aspect of it because, I mean, setting expectations to get up to the surface and then...
If you want to make a good video game, you need to have a good story. Story, a plot, is the most important ingredient when it comes to video games. I don't care. It's the sound, the design, yada yada. It's the story. The story gives you a driven purpose, a passion to continue to play. If the story's not good, why am I playing? I'm just shooting a bunch of random object for nothing. Story is very critical.
Not here to help us.
The whole thing about diegetic writing, right? Like keeping the exposition in the game instead of outside the game. You know, I give a lot of credit to Mark.
After playtests, we'd realized that maybe you need more of a dialogue cue about something.
That's when we started to do like scientists who were literally pop up in a corner and go that way. There's a few of those that we stuck in right at the end when we'd like, well, we get one more session with Hal. He can say, go down here, you know, go around that corner.
Well, so much for the government. Their idea of containment is to kill everyone associated with the program. Judging from your hazard suit, I'd say you were part of what went wrong.
I knew Hal from San Francisco as an artist, cartoonist. He was also an animator and an actor in some science fiction movies. So when we got down to the wire, we did a bunch of voice casting. And
He looks like the same actor who played the Mummy and the Whale movie. Gosh, I forgot his name.
nothing was right, and I just kept thinking of Hal. And I finally just called him and said, Hal, I want you to at least talk to people here so they can hear your voice. And I got him on a speakerphone, and I had a bunch of people gathered in my office. And I'm like, okay, Hal, everybody's here. And he's like, well, what would you like me to say? And everybody was like, this is him. This is the guy.
Why do we all have to wear these ridiculous ties?
Another interesting voice thing was the G-Man. So we liked Mike Shapiro's work. So we knew we wanted to use him, but we brought him in to do Barney.
It's Ben Shapiro, cousin.
And also the G-Man. So we did a take on all the G-Man lines with kind of a straight voice, and I was thinking that, okay, we have something safe, but we're not super excited about it, and give us something else. And he does
G-Man is freaky as hell.
The
He is
border
freaky.
then is in our control for the time being, thanks to you. Quite a nasty piece of work you managed over there. I am impressed.
And we took it back.
If I want to describe G-Man's voice, here's how it's described. It is very ominous and ominous. Ominous and ominous.
And everybody just loved the crazy lizard voice, and so that's how it worked out.
Did you do the Nylanth?
I did.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Martin Luther King.
Just imagine his head floating.
He had a
in
dream?
space as a baby.
Do not do abortion, or your baby will look like that come out of your vagina. That is terrifying.
I went into Gabe's office and I demanded Gabe to either fire Ken or I quit. And Gabe just laughed at me.
Correct response from Gabe.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
Until Bill got there, I was the oldest guy there. It was hard because, I had to go home in the evenings, whereas the young guys who just moved out from Florida or wherever, they did not have to go home in the evenings. I'd go home, see my kids when they were in bed. I would come back down the hill to Valve. Nobody else I worked with had to get up to get their kids off to school in the morning, but I did.
You're wired to just take full advantage of the situation. You put everything into it.
It looks like one of those kids on Disney Channel. Hey, Allie, I got a cool surfboard. Want to surf together? Oh, yeah.
So when we say we worked 18-hour days, that's no exaggeration.
Yeah.
Not at all. I can edit all day. I can design all day. I don't have to worry about anything. Two guys from Microsoft start a game studio with a bunch of...
Oh, yeah. Look at Gabe. Oh, man. That's so sexy. I'm going to turn that into an emoji.
Incredibly capable, with an incredible team. You're gonna push yourself harder than ever before.
I don't usually crunch real hard. I get it done in, like, I come in, I work, I go home. And a lot of people were living like, really long hours. The classic, well, I'll come in at 1 and then goof around for a while and then work late into the late at night. I was employee 17. There was a woman that was the kind of the office manager, and eventually Mona Lisa Guthrie came in at the desk. I was the only woman on the team.
That is sexist. Shame on you, Valve. Shame on you, Gabe. We need more women on Steam.
That was not awesome.
I decided to become a baseball fan here after the birth of my first daughter. So she's the one in Gordon's locker, Isabel, but she's very special needs. She's 25 today. Cognitively, she's about 3 years old. So after her birth, in the middle of Half-Life production, it was really hard. It was really hard because we were getting about 2 hours of sleep at a stretch because she had to be fed through a tube in her stomach every 2 hours. I had just a difficult time relating to the world when she was a baby. I had a hard time just talking to people.
He got old.
Kind of tired and angry.
He looks so different.
Yeah, my wife, she worked at Valve for a while. She did a bunch of textures for the game. Like I say, she did those.
Life is short, man.
She did just a bunch
Enjoy
of
your time.
textures. She textured Big Mama, the sort of boss creature. She textured him. But when Isabel arrived, she obviously had a lot of issues. So I had to stop working and stay with her at home. And it was the last year of Half-Life, and we pretty much crunched that whole year. So I was at work a lot. It was hard. It was definitely a hard year.
Starting a game from scratch with a brand new video game company is always going to be the hardest. And then your company becomes so successful, 10, 20 years later, you become an evil Activision Blizzard corporate recycle cash grinding recycle games. There is no love in that. But this, the love is still there after 25 years. I'm telling you. Chapter 8, Sin.
Games have often had this thing where they're just a little too attached to Star Wars, Blade Runner, Aliens. So it wasn't that hard to try to get people to go, let's think of something really alien. Like what Zen was initially was you're gonna go inside a huge alien organism and kill it or figure out how to turn it on or off or something like that. I didn't know we couldn't actually do that or what was involved.
What does it mean to have alien architecture or a planet that's biologically defining the structures in it, as opposed to what the tools we're good at, which is making rectangles?
And then slowly it scaled back till it was more and more corridors, and that everybody was really good at.
People were finishing up stuff and I was still working on Zen because it was like it went through a lot of iteration, or at least we're trying to figure out what it was. Different people were taking swings at it, either in static
concepts.
concepts.
Weren't you under a bit of a timeline crunch for it as well?
Yeah, it was the end of the game.
Yeah.
I wanted to cut stuff out, and they're like, no, leave it in. I'm like, yeah, but I don't have any,
Lord of the Rings came out in the theater. The movie came out on the DVD. People were, we want more. We want more scenes in Lord of the Rings. So they have extended edition. And people are still asking for more scenes to this day for Lord of the Rings franchise. Of course you're going to leave everything in the game. Of course, leave it in. The more stuff, the more content. It's simple.
There's nothing, I don't have any support for this. Right. And then after a lot of it was built, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to change the gravity and give you a jump pack. That came later. And I was like,
There's a lot of stuff, especially in Zen, where you're getting close to a first draft of some things, right? Because we just didn't have time, and we got to the end of the game, and so we considered not going to Zen. But the art concepts people did were so cool.
For the Zen textures, I was deeply inspired by electron microscope imagery, and we had so much of that regular structural texture material that I wanted to do something more organic. Insects as well. I think there's a lot of textures that were based on beetles. That was really fun and incredibly challenging levels to make because that editor was not friendly for organic shapes.
I built the little behaviors for the tree that hits you if you get too close, and the light stalk that kind of hides. But Ken did a bunch of AIs there, the floating controller guys.
And the flying guys were great, but you had to set up air nodes for them to travel properly. I prototyped a lot, and some of those prototypes were used in the final battle, I believe, and also for the Gonard, which I think Randy did.
We, at some point, have to stop polishing. At some point, we have to, like, it is what it is. And if the player hasn't had fun up until that point, well, then we failed. They're not going to get to that point, so who cares? It just has to finish, and it did.
Yeah, and there's always Half-Life 2 to win them back.
I love that sensation.
You start the game, you build up the suspense, build up the feeling at the warm, bright, cozy building with all these people walking around talking and laughing and having fun. And as you go further into the game, it gets darker, grainier, creepier, outlandish, outworldish, the upside down Stranger Thing. And you're in the final level. The whole atmosphere just changed. You're like, I want to go back home. I want to go back to the first level and feel warm and safe again. Psychology,
Being alone
man.
in an alien dimension. But the experience that people really liked in the game was scientists pop up and Barney pops up and you have companions and you have this feeling of companionship around you with all the other stuff that's going on. So a lot of people missed that, which I understood, and I think if we'd had thought about the ending from the beginning, we would have figured out some ways to do that a little more.
But they didn't have time. On November 19, 1998, Half-Life was released around the world. Most of the team and the family went on vacation to Mexico. They deserve it.
I remember coming back from downtown Cabo very drunk and then running to the beach, but didn't know there was like a 6-foot retaining wall there, so I just went right over.
The good old days.
And then I was hurting so much I slept the night where I fell. Yeah, I woke up the next morning.
I had never heard that
a really
story.
Stiff neck.
Oh my god.
Look at that. You will never see party like these anymore. People go on their phone, people vaping, people getting high on drugs. You don't have simple, sweet, sincere parties anymore. It's just sitting down with your friends and laugh and just be there and live the moment. People really don't have that anymore.
It's a good thing you were pretty young.
I remember after
I wanted to be there in that party. It looks fun.
On the game, I was home one morning, taking a shower, and my wife asked me, like, it's done. Is it any good? Is the game any fun? And I go, I don't know. Like, I hope so.
I don't think it's exaggerating by saying if any one of the crew had disappeared for a month, we wouldn't have shipped. It didn't matter who they were. Everybody was mission critical.
My inspiration from Valve, what I really took away with me was that the thing that is most important to me is what are we making? Coming in as a texture artist, you don't have a lot of expectation that you're going to get to influence that. And I was able to have quite a bit of influence on the what.
It was so fun to work with the people who were making Half-Life. The collection of people were diverse, at least like in their professional backgrounds, was kind of all over the place. And so figuring out...
As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you do not need a job requirement. You can do anything you can in life. Do not limit yourself.
How to work with all those people, but also just the fact that we had hired really stellar people who were good at collaborating, like they're conscientious people, deeply passionate about what they wanted to create. That just was a recipe for a professionally, like, really good time.
It seems to me that one of the things that good games do is make 2 games worth of stuff and then throw away the bad game. And fortunately,
the design's so
Valve
bad.
was able to do that. A lot of companies couldn't do that, but backstopped by Gabe and Mike, Valve could afford to do that.
I always have
absolutely nothing interesting to say when people say, would you reflect on your legacy? Like, I really don't look back a whole lot. I'm always excited by
This guy's a savage.
the future, right? So to me, it's like I can look back at the things we did, but to me, they're just sort of like the stepping stones to what we're going to be able to do in the future. That's just how I'm wired, right?
Oh, is this multiplayer? That actually looks fun. Dude, I gotta try this out. This is like, oh my god, it's CSGO! It went from Half-Life to CSGO! Holy shit! How did I not see this coming? Wow. Valve.